Hello everyone, good day to you. Welcome to our daily Bible study where we go through one chapter of the Bible every day. Today we're talking about 2 Kings chapter 12, the reign of Joash. But before we get to that, I have a request. For any of you who have purchased the 5-minute study books that accompany these studies, I know that they're not all out yet, but if you've purchased one of those, if you would go to Amazon and leave a review, that's super helpful with gaining traction and traffic and having the book promoted by Amazon organically. So if you are somebody who went out and purchased the book, please, if you could, that would mean a lot to me and to the channel. That's one way that you can support the channel in a non-monetary way that helps keep things going. So if you're one of those people, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time to hear my request. Let's talk now about 2 Kings chapter 12. You remember what we talked about in the last chapter? We talked about the evil grandmother, Athaliah, and the boy who lived, who was Joash, who became the boy king at 7 years old. Today we're going to talk about the rest of his reign. We're going to cover about 40 years very, very quickly. This probably fits within the window of 885 to 835 BC. Two of our key characters were featured in the last chapter. The first one is Joash. He became king when he was 7 years old after surviving the murder of the rest of his family by Athaliah. He became the king of Judah, so that's the southern kingdom. And then we have Jehoiada. He was a chief player in overthrowing Athaliah and putting Joash on the throne, and he really becomes essentially Joash's chief advisor. Next, we have Hazael. He's the king of Syria, and Amaziah is going to be mentioned at the end of the chapter. This is Joash's son who's going to take the throne after him. As it was yesterday, our map section is pretty simple. Most of these events played out in Jerusalem, which was the capital of Judah, and it's where Joash would have reigned from. We're also going to mention the city of Gath, which is at the northern part of the territory of Judah, getting over towards the Mediterranean Sea. Gath is just going to be mentioned very briefly. This chapter is somewhat short, just 21 verses. I've got it broken down into 3 sections. The first would be verses 1 through 16. Joash reigns in Judah and repairs the temple. So this is probably one of Joash's more notable achievements, his respect for and restoration of the temple of God. Joash reigned in in Judah for 40 years, and Jehoiada was his advisor. And as long as Jehoiada was alive, the text tells us that Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. So you notice Judah down in the south, they have a couple good kings who follow the Lord. In the north, in Israel, they're all bad. The text always says the same thing. They did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So Joash, at least for the time that Jehoiada was alive, he did what was right. During his reign, he determined to repair the temple of God, which evidently had fallen into disrepair, probably because many of the kings who came before him didn't really care about following God's instructions for worship or honoring God the way he should be honored. To collect money for the project, Jehoiada put a box at the entrance of the temple. And over time, people would bring their money and they would drop it into the box. And when the box got full, the king's secretary and the high priest would count the money, and then they would use it to pay carpenters or masons or people who were going to do these repairs on the temple. Now, we are covering a significant amount of time, so this next section kind of jumps to a whole nother event in Joash's reign. Verses 17 and 18, Hazael spoils Jerusalem. So Hazael of Syria, the king, he attacked the city of Gath, which we saw on our map, and then he turned his sights towards Jerusalem. His men attacked Joash's army, and they even injured Joash. We don't know this from 2 Kings, but rather from 2 Chronicles chapter 24. To appease the king of Syria, Joash gathered all of the treasures, all of the gold, the silver that the kings before him had collected. He also took all the gold out of the temple treasury, and he gave it to Hazael to basically to get him to go away. He said, here's some money, stop attacking us. Hazael took all the riches of Jerusalem, and then he departed the city. So on one hand, early on, we see Joash restoring the temple, but then he's kind of plundering the temple at the end of his life to pay off his enemies. So we'll read more details about the reign of Joash and fill in some of those gaps maybe as we go through the book of 2 Chronicles, which talks about many of these events, many of these kings, and gives us details that aren't in 2 Kings. Joash's reign of 40 years ends when he is killed, and this is verses 19 through 21. After his battle with the Syrians, some of Joash's servants conspired against him, and they assassinated him. Amaziah, who was Joash's son, is going to reign in Judah in his father's place. So what can we learn from the life of Joash? Well, here's one application. Resolve to repair what is broken rather than being content to watch it fall apart. Maybe there's a work, a program, a ministry at your church that's been neglected for a really long time, hasn't gotten the attention that it needs, or perhaps your whole church is shrinking and maybe falling into a bit of obscurity. Don't be someone who observes that ruin with an attitude of defeat. Be somebody like Joash who resolved to do something about the problem. If you read 2 Kings chapter 12, you'll know that Joash's repairs didn't happen overnight. It took a long time, took several years to get this thing done. But he devoted himself to getting it done no matter how long it took. You may not be able to fix everything in your church, in your family, in your life overnight. But rather than giving up in defeat, put together a plan and shift the mindset from one of ruin to one of restoration.